Hello, I'm talking to you right now from the future. And kind of technically the past because pre-recording. Well, anyway, the point being is that I recorded this whole video, and it came to well over an hour. So I had to edit it down, and I think the total thing now stands at about 43 minutes. To make it easier then for you, if you want to navigate through the video at a later watch time, I am going to put in the description of the video some time codes as well, just to clarify that you can skip through if you would like. But without further ado, I give you the previous recording I did, so definitely from my past, definitely from yours, and I'll see you at the end. Hello everyone, welcome to this part 2 of my unboxing the Season 8 Blu-ray box set. Last time I showed you what it looks like from the outside, but now that I've had a watch of all the extras featured in this marvellous box set, and I can say it's pretty marvellous, I will talk you through what they are and the contents of each disc. Disc 1, Terror of the Autons. So there's 4 episodes on here for Terror of the Autons, of course written by Robert Holmes, directed by Barry Letts. On the disc, you have updated special effects with the optional CSO enhancements and new CGI special effects. There's optional 5.1 surround sound, audio commentary from Katy Manning, of course Joe Grant, Nick Courtney, the Brigadier, and producer-director Barry Letts, recorded in 2010. In infotext, so production insights and trivia delivered via an optional subtitle track, a PDF written archive, a coming soon trailer for The Mind of Evil, HD photo gallery of location, studio and behind the scenes images, BBC Trails and Continues, which is the original continuity announcements, and actually says reconstructed using the best available materials, so I guess not actually the originals, just made exactly how they were. You have the clean opening and closing titles for Season 8. Apparently there were distinct colour variations for the opening and closing titles during the Pertwee era. The version presented here was utilised for Terror of the Autons, of course. But actually my focus in talking about these discs will be the various documentaries. First of all, we have Behind the Sofa, which has Katy Manning, Stuart Bevan, Jeanette Fielding, Sarah Sutton, Sacha Dhawan, and Anjali Mohindra. Where they watch highlights from Terror of the Autons, and that's great. I've watched Gogglebox, so I can see why they've done this. It's kind of fun. Yeah. I mean, I have to say I didn't spend too much time watching it because I'm much more into the documentaries. But if that's your thing, yes, they have it all there for you. So the first documentary that I watched, of course, was the Making of documentary. And it says here in the notes that the contributors were Barry Letts, Terrence Dix, Richard Franklin, who of course is Captain Yates, and Phil Collinson. That was actually a nice surprise seeing him, because I didn't read any of the information about these things when I just sort of put it on and started flicking through quite excitedly. It was quite nice to see him there talking about Terror of the Autons. And actually, one of the most interesting things about that documentary was what it said about how Terror of the Autons, and actually the Pertwee era as a whole, really inspired how Russell T and Phil Collinson approached bringing back the show. And obviously the obvious thing would be to compare the Autons, specifically the Autons, and how they're used in Spearhead from Space, with Rose, the first episode. Also, Phil Collinson pointed out the idea of UNIT being a family unit, literally, and that's actually one of the driving forces behind why Rose, Martha, and Donna, they all have families. There's also interviews from archive footage from 1995, John Pertwee and Katy Manning, of course. One of the other things that was spoken about was the classic story that I'm sure that many of you know, but some of you may not, so I will repeat here, is that Katy Manning twisted her ankle on her very first day, and she was told, perhaps from the brother of, I think, the woman who played Liz Shaw, I can't remember, that she would be replaced. So that obviously caused her a lot of distress, and John Pertwee, the hero that he was, enveloped her in his very long coat and said that it would all be all right, and then he got angry and told everyone off, which is brilliant. Although apparently Nick Courtney also was ill at that time. Said extreme anxiety, which is interesting. I didn't know about that. There was also, obviously, because this introduces the Master for the very first time, talk of the Doctor and Brigadier relationship being like Sherlock and Watson. Therefore, they decided to create a Moriarty being the Master, the antithesis of the Doctor, of course, which is just fantastic. And the way that he's characterized here as a smooth talker, very suave, sophisticated businessman, I think was so appropriate. And actually, I'd quite like to see a Master portrayed in that way now. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. A guy going around in a limo with dark glasses on, hypnotizing people in much the same way that big businesses and corporations do now. I mean, I think it's actually perhaps more appropriate now that we live in a time of uber capitalism. Although we're all going to end up working for Amazon, so it feels actually more like feudalism. You work for Amazon, come home, buy everything off Amazon, that sort of thing. Ramble aside, he would be just perfect to epitomise that big businessman that we all know and love. One of the other things that I just remembered is that they loved the idea, Russell and Phil Collinson, they loved the idea that because it's set on Earth, it was tangible, and it was obviously great for the reboot. And I think that does show. I think Phil says something along the lines of that. You can imagine that you're that girl from Earth, and actually, I think when he said that, it really triggered something in my mind about the new series. Well, let's just say the Whittaker era, in that, in many ways, obviously, we complain about how the Doctor's characterized at the moment, but actually, I think that comes from the fact that the companions aren't characterized at all, in my opinion, and they're kind of more important because they're obviously who you see the Doctor through their eyes. You see the Doctor through their eyes, so how they feel about the Doctor, how they respond to her or him, is important, and then you can put yourself in their shoes, and that that really struck me when they were talking about that. Of course, they were also talking about police in here, because there's a policeman who rips his face off, and apparently someone in the House of Lords, I think, said that it would undermine young people's confidence in the police, which is absolutely ridiculous. Or there maybe everything that's happening today can be traced back to that one episode. There you go, you heard it here first. Let's ban this episode. There's also an element that I'm going to touch upon in my part 2 of an Unearthly Child review, which you may or may have not seen. Hopefully I'll put a link somewhere on the screen now, where it's talking about, the show really handles technology moving on, and I think that's quite important, because in that episode it's about fire and being seen as a threat. In this episode, it's about plastic. So actually, yeah, let's just talk about the next documentary, which is Plastic Fantastic. Now, Plastic Fantastic is actually quite hilarious. You don't expect it going into it, but I think it's just due completely down to the contribution from Robert Shearman, who who essentially says that people who buy plastic flowers deserve to die. And I'm not saying he's wrong. It's just the way he says it. I think he says something like they deserve to be asphyxiated, which is even funnier. But yeah, that was about plastic taking over. And somebody says the devil's in your house. That was a quite nice phrase, The fact that Doctor Who, again, it became about the things that are local to you, and the things that a child would interact with on a day-to-day basis become scary, not necessarily sort of existential outside things, that are intangible. Here we have plastic. Everyone has plastic in their house, especially at that time. It probably just did feel like it was taking over, and this idea of innocence being turned into something horrific. And as I say, I touch upon the idea of new technology becoming something to fear, and that's pertinent in episode 2 of my Unearthly Child review, but it will also be something that comes up if I review Terror of the Autons as well, because I think a lot of Doctor Who is about that. I mean, you have the Cybermen and the Daleks as well, And a lot of their characterization is built around the idea that, essentially the next step in evolution is terrifying. The possibility that we could find ourselves changed by our own inventions is really fascinating to me. There is the Doctor's Moriarty. So this is the third documentary on this disc. It does actually recycle a few clips from the making of, but it's great. Again, it sets up this whole idea about the Master being Moriarty. But it also touches upon this idea that John Pertwee's Doctor is kind of a rebel and a bully in many ways, especially to Jo Grant when he first meets her. And I have seen clips of those on YouTube, so I'm not completely in the dark about that. And someone says, forgive me, I can't remember, but it says that we accept the Doctor being tetchy because we know he's basically good. And the Master is obviously comes across as nice and kind, but actually he has a black heart. And I think that's so true. They are the mirror images of each other, and they obviously go into this idea that John Sims' Master is a reflection of David Tennant's Master as well, in that sort of energy, and they're matching each other. But I quite like, I've always quite liked the Doctor being a bit grumpier, and I really loved Capaldi's turn as the Doctor because of that. So it is interesting to see how they reflect. There was also, obviously, they talked about the ongoing arc with the Master and the unfortunate death of Roger Delgado. And also this idea of, can we be too overexposed with the Master? Because obviously this season 8, he's in every story, sorry. And I think it was Terrence Dicks that actually said he's the main story. He better be there for a damn good reason. And I think that's a good assertion. Okay, then. So out of all of those, out of those 3 main documentaries, I would recommend them all. I do think the making of is probably the better one, because essentially Plastic Fantastic and the Doctor's Moriarty are just extensions of that. But I enjoyed it all immensely. So yeah, definitely recommend. So disc 2, The Mind of Evil. There's 6 episodes, written by Don Horton, produced by Barry Letts, but directed by Timothy Coombe, and more on him in a moment. So there's audio commentary with Katy Manning, Fernanda Marlowe, Pixen Lim, Barry Letts, Terrence Dicks, and Timothy Coombe, and apparently a stunt performer, Derek Ware, I think that's how you say his name, Ware, recorded in 2012. So there's info text. Again, there's a making of documentary, of course, which I'll be talking about, Behind the Sofa, which I won't really be talking about. There's a BBC Television Centre documentary, which is kind of interesting, but also, I was like, oh, okay, there's going to be lots of mentions of Doctor Who, and was a bit disappointed that there wasn't. So, well, fair enough. But it was, it was shot during the production of The Mind of Evil and broadcast in 1971 anyway. There is Now and Then, which is just a look at how the filming locations in London and Dover Castle have changed over the years. There's a Blue Peter broadcast, which looks at makeup techniques employed by BBC programmes in the early 1970s. There's a BBC Trails and Continues, as always. A HD photo gallery as well, coming soon for the Claws of Axos. PDF written archive, which includes production paperwork, cuttings, and first drafts scripts of the Pandora Machine. There is I kind of remember this, but there was a BBC South East news sort of feature, which was broadcast in 2013, a short news item covering the cast and crew's return to Dover Castle and the colorization of The Mind of Evil, which of course was black and white for a very long time. I do actually remember that because I do live in the southeast, and I'm pretty sure I remember seeing that as it aired and was very excited. The making of documentary, again, I think the best thing on this disc. Contributors include Nicholas Courtney, Barry Letts, Terrence Dicks, Timothy Coombe, Pixen Lim, and Fernanda Marlowe, of course. Now, this one was hilarious because, I feel really bad for Timothy Coombe. It was just, he was given a bad hand, I think. We never know what the full story is, but essentially, he ran out so far over budget that he was never invited back again. That seems to be the gist of what happened there. The story itself was inspired by, Vietnam War, MK Ultra. I imagine that wasn't mentioned, but I'm assuming because obviously there's a huge mind control plot. That is a huge thing in it. I'm not sure when we found out about MK Ultra actually, but that's insane. That still freaks me out today. I mean, and how much they could get away with back then, and how much they're possibly doing now. I don't know. We won't know. We may not know for another 50 years. There's a lovely piece about the casting of Pik-Sen Lim, who plays Chin Lee, I think. Again, I hope I'm pronouncing everything correctly. Because she was actually a real Asian. And you know how Doctor Who has fared in the past with the casting of, well... I don't know if I actually want to go there, to be honest. Just avoid that controversy. It's a piece of history. So, yes, they cast a real Asian. Fantastic. And she's the wife of the director. And actually does I think, quite a convincing job. There's something, because I don't know, well, people don't know on this channel. I don't think I've mentioned it yet, but I mean, obviously, I do filmmaking, and I remember doing a short film that I directed, which required shooting in a prison. But luckily, my producer had connections, and we were able to sort something out. Not a prison, though. Prisons are notoriously difficult to get access for filming in. You will call around, and if they even answer, it will be a firm no. And they had this problem a few times throughout the classic era, so they thought, you know what, let's just get a castle. And they did. They chose Dover Castle, and it works. Not only did they manage to double Dover Castle as a prison, but they managed to also get a real missile. Well, you can start to see where why they started to go over budget, can't you? And a helicopter. And this I found ridiculous, because he said, well, we were already going over budget, so I just thought, well, a helicopter is only a couple of grand more, isn't it? A couple of thousand. I thought, Christ, I'd love working for the BBC, wouldn't you? So that was great. They also have a limo for the master, limo and cigar. So yeah, there was expensive sets, the interiors for the prison. But yes, Tim Coombe, unfortunately, given a good slap, I think. And bless his heart, no one wants to be told that they can't direct Doctor Who anymore. Especially when you've done it before. An interesting tidbit I found out was that Pik-Sen Lim was actually pregnant at the time of shooting, which explains her awkward fall. You'll know what I mean if you've seen the story. But aside from that, that's really the best thing on that disc. As I say, the television centre documentary is about many shows. Doctor Who gets a mention, which is just as well, but it's not really about Doctor Who. And again, the Blue Peter thing, it's all about the makeup, but Doctor Who just gets a couple of mentions. I was watching that one on fast forward because I don't have all the time in the world, for Christ. So yes, we move on to Disc 3, The Claws of Axos, which is perhaps the strangest Doctor Who episode in this set, I think. Claws of Axos, 4 episodes, written by Bob Baker and Dave Martin, produced by Barry Letts, of course, and directed by Michael Ferguson. Brilliant. Audio commentary with Katy Manning, Richard Franklin, and Barry Letts, recorded in 2004. So you may have heard it all before, all these commentaries, but they're worth listening to, I think. There's infotext, which obviously provides production information and trivia. The Vampire from Space, which is an extended cut of the opening episode, featuring the original story title and material deleted from the TV broadcast. So there you go, sink your teeth into that one. Now and then, a visit to the original locations, once more, comparing how they appear today to 1971. There's a restoration featurette, which was a look at how episodes 2 and 3 were restored for the original DVD release in 2005. There's the 2005 DVD restoration, of course. Episodes 2 and 3 converted from PAL, from the only existing NTSC colour broadcast tapes. There you go, if you're into all of that, it's there for you. There's BBC Trails and Continuity coming soon, HD photo gallery, PDF written archive, Behind the sofa, yet again, there is studio footage, which is the full 72-minute studio recording taped on the 22nd of January 71 at Television Centre. Deleted and extended scenes. Wonderful, wonderful documentary, which is called Directing Who, and that has Michael Ferguson, the director of this story, featured. Now, Michael Ferguson, this is interesting actually, because this is really the only documentary on this disc. But I learned a fair bit about shooting in the 70s. And Michael had quite a cool outlook on the whole thing, I think. He felt that, I think, Doctor Who could be less formulaic in the way he shot anything at the time. You have multicam on the stage, and according to him, actually, I mean, you always see those pictures of these huge cameras, but by then I think they were quite flexible. They could actually move around quite quickly, because by then, as I say, the cameramen were absolute pros, top of their game, especially with Doctor Who, for Christ's sake. They've been going for so long. And that actually, because some directors disagree with this, but he did not like and didn't get on with location single camera film shooting, which is of course how you do it today, anywhere. But he was saying that the cameramen were actually excited whenever they're in the studio to be able to show kind of what kind of cool camera movements they could do. And I think that's great, trying to always push themselves to be better and to be different. And of course, this story is certainly that. Michael Ferguson, he says that everyone was trying to capitalize on new technology, and everybody was greedy and wanted to try new things, but they also wanted to claim that they were the first to do it. The first to do certain visual effects, which I thought was quite funny. So you can imagine this kind of bravado going around BBC Television Centre at the time. Like, did you see that effect? That was me who did that. Whether, of course, they did or not, I don't know. But I like to imagine it. And he talks a lot about Barry Letts, giving him praise for allowing directors to go for it. And I think he says that it's possible because he was a director as well, so he understood. He understood the restraints and the conditions of everything. There's also a point about rehearse record, where they would rehearse a scene, record a scene, rehearse a scene, record a scene, which actually, it sounds better. I mean, that sounds more like how movies are shot today, not television. Television is pretty, bam, bam, bam. But I mean, I do know that people like Tarantino like to rehearse the scene, then shoot, then they move on to the next scene, then shoot, and that is sensible. But apparently they didn't do that before then. Apparently, Doctor Who really made them go, well, hang on, we can't, have all these things to set up and shoot it all at night. We just won't get through it. So if we set up a scene, rehearse it, shoot it, then we can collapse all the sets, all of the effects, whatever, and then shoot the next scene, which makes sense. Of course, there is a making of Axon stations. I have to tell you, I was so engrossed in watching this that I kind of forgot to make notes. So from memory, I remember there being lots of talk about the guy that cycles into icy water in January. There was a lot about weather, just how miserable everyone was and how everyone wanted to go home. But also, there was interesting things about how they made the creatures in this new sort of technology of sort of rubber costuming, which I thought was quite neat. And of course, the origin story of Bob Baker and Dave Martin, who I think wrote something on spec, sent it off to the BBC, and Terence Dix ended up reading it and found it hilarious. So they were like, actually, why don't we give them a Doctor Who? And I'm so glad that actually that Doctor Who did take a chance and let some new writers pen an episode. I really wish that happened more now. I wish that there was essentially more of an open door for this kind of show. Because I have a lot that I want to put out there. In fact, I may put it out on this channel. Because as I say, I do write an awful lot, and I have written some fan fiction. And I mean, I call it fan fiction because obviously it involves characters that I did not create. Although by that metric, all of Doctor Who is fan fiction, and I wouldn't disagree with that. But I also write my own stuff as well. So yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's hard sometimes to get your stuff out there. But I would be interested if you're listening, which of course you're not. Okay, discs 4 and 5, Colony in Space. There's 6 episodes, written by Malcolm Hulke, and you wouldn't want to make him angry. Produced by Barry Letts, directed by Michael Bryant. Audio commentary, Katy Manning, Maurice Perry, Bernard Kay, Terrence Dix, Michael Bryant, the director, assistant floor manager Graham Harper. Now we know that name, don't we? Recorded in 2011. Info text, of course, Behind the Sofa, Trails Continues, HD Gallery, coming soon, PDF archive. Of course, there's also an alternative version of episode 2, where it says that there's an early edit in featuring a brief moment of violence that was cut from the transmitted version. There you go, brief moment of violence. See, that's interesting because, of course, we know that in the episode Robot of Sherwood, the Sheriff of Nottingham did have his head chopped off, didn't he? But that was cut. It would be interesting to see that. Film trims highlights a 12-minute cut down of 16mm film, not included in the final programs. This footage is mute as the soundtrack no longer exists. Okay. Location film trims, 23 minutes of mute film footage. Special effects film trims, 35 minutes of model and effect shots, and that's pretty cool to watch actually. 2011 DVD restoration, and of course, what I'll be talking about is the making of documentary. It actually opens with a great IMC trailer for job seekers, though it kind of turned my head when they said, "Are you 35 to 50 years old, and good at digging or something?" I thought that's the worst kind of job when you enter that age group. But I know that's the point. It's the first story set off of Earth since the Doctor's exile, which makes it very interesting, especially as it's his second season. They talk about the Doctor being an unwilling spy, and again, there's quite a lot of political commentary. However, this is the interesting thing, because, as I said before about big corporations, well, this one is so focused on that. Big corporations run the world. And it is referred to, of course, as this left-wing idea. Which is why I find it interesting that whenever somebody tries to criticize companies such as Disney or even BBC or Amazon, in fact, they are criticized as being right-wing, which is interesting how they've managed to spin that one. But no, of course, the Doctor wants to look out for the little guy. So there we are. We have a bit of satire going into the program, which is great to see. It's always, even Terror of the Autons, for Christ's sake, it's all satire. BBC exec Ronnie Marsh upset that a woman in the original draft of the script is killing people, referring to it as kinky. And not just referring to it as kinky, apparently walking around the office quite distressed, saying, "It's kinky, you can't do that, it's kinky," which is hilarious. So it was changed to a man. There you go. Again, you can't have women be murderers, apparently. They wanted to shoot in Tenerife. Of course you would. They managed to get a quarry in St. Austell, Cornwall, which is quite different. Nothing against Cornwall, but if I could go to Tenerife and film something, wow, yes, of course I would. No wonder the Chibnall era is country hopping constantly. There are talks about the servo robots being ridiculous and their arms... I can just see it now, just going up and down, and the fact that they just kept on crying with laughter. It sounds like a hoot. Imagine being on set with Katy Manning. She just sounds brilliant. There's actually a very interesting canonical comment about the TARDIS, because it bangs in. It just, when he's materializing, it doesn't fade in and out. And the director, Michael Bryant, claimed that was because he'd actually never, not seen it in so long, or not really seen the TARDIS appear, so he just did it. But it kind of works though, because although this wasn't intentional, the TARDIS is being controlled by the Time Lords, so that actually works just by a stroke of luck. Although it's also odd that no one said to him, "Oh, hang on, no, the TARDIS needs to come in and out, like phase in and out." You'd think they would. There's a nice little comment there where the director actually says, "You know what? Although it was quite difficult to film, that is what you're paid to do. You're paid to come up with the solutions." And I think he's right about that. Having been on a lot of shoots, there's no shoot that runs smoothly, I found. Actually, that's not true. There are a couple, but they're usually quite small scale. With something like this big, there's always a bit of faff, a few delays here and there, a lot of hurry up and wait. And you have to think on your feet constantly. Whether it's actually, even if the day's going well, there's always something that comes up, and you have to think of a plan B, even for something as small as getting people to the toilet or getting them food. It's a constant exercise in figuring out what to do. So discs 6 and 7, which of course features the Daemons. 5 episodes, written by Guy Leopold, which is actually Barry Letts and Robert Sloman. Produced and directed by Barry Letts. They used the alias because of union problems, I believe. They started to get quite funny with directors writing their own episodes. They needed to get work out to the writers, and I understand that. However, look, would you ever not want to see the Daemons? Would you ever not want that to exist? Of course not. It's fantastic. So, we have audio commentary. Katy Manning, Richard Franklin, Damaris Heyman, and director Christopher Barry, recorded in 2011. There's 5.1 surround sound, of course, new for the Blu-ray, info text, behind the sofa, location footage, Christopher Barry featurette, of course, about the director of the Daemons, where he returns to the village of Aldbourne to reminisce about his career in film and television. I'll just touch upon that here now. That's quite good, actually. I really enjoyed that. That was quite nice, bit sentimental, but lovely. The Pertwee Years, which is John Pertwee's introduction to episode 5 from the 1992 VHS release, showcasing some favourite stories. Tomorrow's World, which was reporting on the techniques used for the first colour restoration. That's good if you're into that kind of thing. I was less bothered, I have to confess, though you do learn a lot. Again, colorization test from 1992. BBC Trails and Continues, HD Photo Gallery coming soon, PDF written archive. On disc 7, there is obviously a Daemons Omnibus, which is a 90-minute movie version edited by Barry Letts with Christopher Barry for a repeat screening just after Christmas 1971, where they lost 20 minutes material to help tighten the story, and that also includes 5.1 surround sound. And we have visual effects with an interview of Peter Day, the Silbury Dig, which is from the BBC archives, believed to have influenced the development of the Daemons, which was broadcast in 1968. There's a Remembering Barry Letts, another really nice tribute documentary. The 50th Anniversary Archive, where Richard Franklin and Annika Wills are interviewed. But yes, my main focuses will be the making of documentary, of course, the Living with Levene with Toby Haydock, where he spends a memorable weekend in the company of Sergeant Benton. That's the slug line here. And I can tell you it's mad. Definitely worth your watch, though. And the Direct Route. And the Direct Route bonus scene, which I don't actually know why they cut that. It's kind of... It could have just gone in. It was only about 2 minutes extra. So the beauty of the Daemons, I think, and this is really brought to the fore in the making of the Daemons, The Devil Rides Out, which is that Richard Franklin and John Levene, they get their moment. There's a lot to talk about the fact that, although they didn't realise who the writer was, or who the writers were, they did understand that it was beautifully observed, because they said they knew that the person writing the script had to have a knowledge of these people. It was brilliant. It brought out all of their characters. And now here's an interesting thing, because they overspent here as well, but they were purposefully doing it to make it really filmic and mysterious, and they actually spent 2 weeks to shoot this story on location, rather than just the 1 week on location. So they really got to know Devil's End Village, and there was a lot of walking around the Long Barrows and Aldbourne. There's a bit of talk about Bok, and how successful he was or was not, and how interesting it was to be running around in a leotard, as often that would be the case with Doctor Who monsters at the time. That is a really nice documentary. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, there's so much I'm just trying to get through. But it really felt like a momentous story, and I think, there's a lot of reverence for the story anyway, and knowing more about the behind the scenes makes me love it just so much more, and you really should check it out if you can. There's a little, the little piece about Christopher Barry. I will say there was one funny thing. I mean, obviously he's directed a lot of Doctor Who stories. In fact, he directed the first Dalek story. He says that he initiated on-site caterers because he couldn't he didn't like the fact that people were having sort of packed lunches up a hill in freezing cold weather, and therefore putting the BBC budget up massively. But it makes sense. Again, just touching upon Remembering Barry Letts, that's a wonderful celebration. Just tremendous to see how how much of an impact these people have had, and how interesting their lives are, actually. Again, Living with Levene, I'll just touch upon that. I mean, I can imagine that good old John Levene is slightly... I don't say he could be quite irritating, but I think in the same way that people talk about John Barrowman being, irritating after a while, because if you're not ready to bring the energy to cope with someone who's quite full on, and, that's wonderful. We need people in the world like that. But, if you're not that way inclined, you're going to have a bit of a personality clash. I think that's possibly why they mention there's some controversy around him. But I don't know. I really liked him, actually. He seemed colourful, very colourful character. I think that was my takeaway. And a good showman. And he would get on my nut. I don't know if I'd be able to handle him. We can all be a bit of attention seekers sometimes. We can all be massive extroverts, but at the same time, I quite like it indoors, being a bit cosy and quiet and looking at Doctor Who stuff. So, but it would be interesting to interview him, actually. It would be nice to get to know him a bit deeper. So we have the direct route. Again, this is quite epic. This is like one of the old Top Gear specials or something, where we have Tim Coombe, unfortunately only there for one day, the first day, with Michael Bryant, Graham Harper as well, who obviously we know goes on to direct episodes of Doctor Who as well. But he was just the floor manager on an episode. But still, it's just great to have him there and that kind of directorial insight. Yeah, they have 3 days to cover 5 locations from the stories. I believe all the stories in this box set, and that's really nice. Again, it kind of lets you in on that directorial eye and what they're always thinking about and how things have changed, and that's really nice. For me, though, the best documentary on these 2 discs, and in actual fact, maybe the entire thing, would probably have to be Devil's Weekend. 50 years since the Daemons. There was just something about it, It was shot during COVID. There's a few jokes about that. Has John Levene and Katy Manning. Actually, Katy Manning, she rides into the village in style in Bessie, which is amazing. It's just a very sweet documentary, and it opens with it as a TV report, just like the Daemons. And there's beautiful drone shots of the church and the environments. They go see the Wests, who own the Blue Boar, which obviously was the cloved hoof in the episode. And they talk about John. They talk about John Pertwee, and Katy Manning tells the story about the fact that she was actually grieving for someone that she'd lost during that filming, during the original filming in '71, and on the Devil's Hump, her and John, laid down and had a lovely chat and just looked at the stars. And John sort of talked about Wurzel Gummidge coming up and all these things. I mean, it was really beautiful, actually, and an insight into Katie's soul. They walk around, they see the impact that story has had on the village. And, I'm a sentimental old git, really. At heart. So yeah, it was truly lovely. I really liked it, and especially seeing the Dalek and TARDIS dustbins. Oh yeah, you got to watch out for them. So moving on to the final disc, disc 8, which is the bonus disc. You have Return of the Autons, a special mini episode made to promote the Blu-ray release, starring Katy Manning and Stuart Bevan and as Joe and Cliff Jones, written and directed by Pete McTee, of course. Season 8 BBC Audio Promo, PDF Written Archive, of course, the Panopticon Archive, which is John Pertwee's appearance in 1991. There's a Blue Peter, Visit to the Television Centre Scenery Block. There's a Target audiobook, it's the complete Target adaptation of Terror of the Autons, novelised by Terrance Dicks, which is pretty cool, actually, because everyone loves an audiobook these days. You have Terrance and Me, which has Frank Skinner, and takes a fond look back at one of the most beloved behind-the-scenes contributors, writer, script editor, and author Terrance Dicks. That's lovely as well. But again, taking the top spot in the bonus disc will have to be the In Conversation with Katy Manning. It has Matthew Sweet. He has a conversation, of course, with Katy, actually kind of spanning not just her time on Doctor Who and specific episodes, but her whole life and why she maybe moved into doing acting and what drove her to be this person, specifically because she's, pretty much blind as well, and how fearless she was in overcoming some very tragic events. I don't really want to spoil that one. Much like, a lot of these things I've been talking about, I just wanted to give you a taster because I don't want to go too deep. There's so much great stuff, so much great information out there. And that one, I think, was quite revealing. Obviously, she's mad as a bag of frogs, but we love her for it. So, yes, really, really fantastic. The work that these guys have put in to produce this box set is brilliant, as always. And I hope that I can enjoy the rest to come as well. I hope that they keep coming, and I hope that I can do these videos. And I would just like to say a huge congratulations to James Mitchell, who is the first person ever to comment on one of my videos. He commented on my previous video about the unboxing of this box set, and he said everything's PG except the bonus disc. As it's 12, yes, it's rated 12, and I did respond because I was thinking, yeah, actually, why is that? Why is it? I mean, I know how these things work. They have to review every single piece of information, everything, every piece of material that actually appears on every disc, and then they make a judgment call from that. And of course, whatever the highest rating is on any of the discs is what they have to call the entire box set. So why is it that the final disc, the bonus disc, a 12? Now, I actually do have a theory as to this, and I think it's perhaps the conversation with Katy Manning, because she speaks a lot about, well, there's some sexual innuendo, things like this, and I'm not really sure how they judge it these days, but it's always been the case that they've been a lot more prudish when it comes to sexual matters than, say, let's say, violence. Always a bit odd, something that we, the way that we approach these things in the West. But yes, so I would say that's probably why she talks about a lot of boyfriends. And also, yeah, I mean, she did have a lot of horrendous things happen to her, including a car accident, which she talks about. I suspect it's probably that. Otherwise, I can't really think as to why. I'm not sure whether she swears. Maybe she does. I can't remember. And of course, Frank Skinner as well, being the comedian he is. I can't remember if he said a few choice words, but that really seems to be what I would say has caused this. Other than that, maybe the Target novelization audiobook fits under a 12 as well. I'm not sure. I doubt it, though. So yeah, I know I couldn't really answer it. It's quite a peculiar thing. It would be interesting to see what the people who put these ratings on there, the BFC, actually think. I'm not sure whether that's the BFC or just the BBC. Well, there you go. That was my recording from the past. I hope you enjoyed. I hope it was insightful. I tried to keep as much of the good stuff in there. I always appreciate likes, comments, criticism, all of that stuff. So hopefully we can get chatting about this excellent season. So it'd be great to talk about Classic Who. It doesn't get enough love, and I hope that this video can kickstart something like that. Have a fantastic day, and thank you for watching, as always.